Anne Frank, top of page 69, Friday, November 20th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, we don't really know how to react. Up to now, very little news about the Jews had reached us here, and we thought it best to stay as cheerful as possible. Every now and then, Miep used to mention that what happened to a friend and mother of Miss Van Dam would start to cry, so she decided it was better not to say any more. But we bombarded Mr. Dressel with questions, and the stories he had to tell were so gruesome and dreadful that we can't get them out of our heads. Once we've had time to digest the news, we'll probably go back to our usual joking and teasing. It won't do us or those outside any good if we continue to be as gloomy as we are now. And what would be the point of turning the secret annex into a melancholy annex? No matter what I'm doing, I can't help thinking about those who are gone. I catch myself laughing and remember that it's a disgrace to be so cheerful, but am I supposed to spend the whole day crying? No, I can't do that. This gloom will pass. Added to this misery, there's another, but of more personal nature, and it pales in comparison to the suffering I've been told you about. Still, I can't help telling you that lately I've begun to feel deserted. I'm surrounded by too great a void. I never used to give it much thought, since my mind was filled with friends and having a good time. Now I think either about unhappy things or about myself. It's taken a while, but I finally realized that Father, no matter how kind he may be, can't take the place of my former world. When it comes to my feelings, Mother and Margot ceased to count long ago. But why do I bother you with this foolishness? I'm terribly ungrateful, Kitty. I know, but when I've been scolded for the umpteenth time, and have all these other woes to think about as well, my head begins to reel. Yours, Anne. Saturday, November 28th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, we've been using too much electricity and have now exceeded our ration. The result, excessive economy and the prospect of having the electricity cut off. No light for 14 days. That's a pleasant thought, isn't it? But who knows? Maybe it won't be so long. It's too dark to read after 4:30, so we while away the time with all kinds of crazy activities, telling riddles, doing calisthenics in the dark, speaking English or French, reviewing books. After a while, everything gets boring. Yesterday, I discovered a new pastime, using a good pair of binoculars to peek into the lighted rooms of the neighbors. During the day, our curtains can't be open, not even an inch, but there's no harm when it's dark. I never knew that the neighbors could be so interesting. Ours are, at any rate. I've come across a few at dinner, one family making home movies, and the dentist across the way working on a frightened old lady. Mr. Dressel, the man who was said to get along so well with children and to absolutely adore them, has turned out to be an old-fashioned disciplinarian and preacher of unbearably long sermons of manners. Since I have the singular pleasure of sharing my far too narrow room with His Excellency, and since I'm generally considered to be the worst behaved of the three young people, it is all I can do to avoid having the same old scolding and admonitions repeatedly flung at my head, and to pretend not to hear. This wouldn't be so bad if Mr. Dressel weren't such a tattletale and hadn't singled out Mother to be the recipient of his reports. If Mr. Dressel just read me the riot act, Mother's lectured me all over again, this time throwing the whole book at me. And if I'm really lucky, Miss Van D calls me to account 5 minutes later and lays down the law as well. Really, it's not easy being the badly brought-up center of attention of a family of nitpickers. In bed at night, as I ponder my many sins and exaggerated shortcomings, I get so confused by the sheer amount of things I have to consider that I either laugh or cry, depending on my mood. Then I fall asleep with a strange feeling of wanting to be different than I am, or being different than I want to be, or perhaps of behaving...
Basic, Clarissa Van Noy, Josh Gay, Chase Brundage. To the office, please.
I want to be, or perhaps of behaving differently than I am or want to be. Oh dear, now I'm confusing you too, forgive me, but I don't like crossing things out, and in these times of scarcity, tossing away a piece of paper is clearly taboo, so I can only advise you not to reread the above passage and to make no attempt to get to the bottom of it, because you'll never find your way out again. Yours, Anne. Monday, December 7th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Hanukkah and St. Nicholas Day nearly coincided this year. They were the only one day apart. We didn't make much of a fuss with Hanukkah, merely exchanging a few small gifts and lighting the candles. Since candles are in short supply, we lit them for only 10 minutes, but as long as we sing the song that doesn't matter. Mr. Van Daan made a menorah out of wood, so that was taken care of too. St. Nicholas Day on Saturday was much more fun. During dinner, Bep and me were so busy whispering to Father that our curiosity was aroused, and we suspected they were up to something. Sure enough, at 8 o'clock, we all trooped downstairs through the hall in pitch darkness. It gave me the shivers, and I wish I was safely back upstairs to the alcove. We could switch on the light, since this room doesn't have any windows. When that was done, Father opened the big cabinet. "Oh, how wonderful!" we all cried. In the corner was a large basket decorated with colorful paper and a basket of black Peter. We quickly took the basket upstairs with us. Inside was a little gift for everyone, including an appropriate verse. Since you're familiar with the kinds of poems people write each other on St. Nicholas Day, I won't copy them down for you. I received a Cupid doll, Father got bookends, and so on. Well, anyway, it was a nice day, and since the 8 of us had never celebrated St. Nicholas Day before, this is a good time to begin. Yours, Ian. P.S. We also had presents for everyone downstairs. A few things left over from the good old days, plus Meep and Bep are always grateful for money. Today we heard that Mr. Van Daan's ashtray, Mr. Dussel's picture frame, and Father's bookends were made by none other than Mr. Velasco. How anyone can be so clever with his hands is a mystery to me. Thursday, December 10th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Mr. Van Daan used to be in the meat, sausage, and spice business. He was hired for his knowledge of spices, and yet, to our great delight, it's his sausage challenge that have come in handy now. We ordered a large amount of meat, under the counter, of course, that we were planning to preserve in case there were hard times ahead. Mr. Van Daan decided to make bratwurst sausages and bitterwurst. I had fun watching him put the meat through the grinder once, twice, 3 times. Then he added the remaining ingredients to the ground meat and used a long pipe to force the mixture into the casings. We ate the bratwurst with sauerkraut for lunch, but the sausages, which were going to be canned, had to be dry first, so we hung them over a pole suspended from the ceiling. Everyone who came into the room burst into laughter when they saw the dangling sausages. It was such a comical sight. The kitchen was a shambles. Mr. Van Daan, clad in his wife's apron and looking fatter than ever, was working away at the meat. What with his bloody hands, red face, and spotted apron, he looked like a real butcher. Miss Van D was trying to do everything at once, learning Dutch out of a book, stirring the soup, washing the meat, sighing and moaning about her broken rib. That was what happens when old ladies do such stupid exercise to get rid of their fat behinds. Dussel had an eye infection and was sitting next to the stove dabbing his eye with chamomile tea. Pim, seated in the one ray of sunshine coming through the window, kept having to move his chair this way and that way to stay out of the way. His rheumatism must have been bothering him, because he was slightly hunched over and was keeping an eye on Mr. Van Daan with an agonized expression on his face. He remembered one of those aged invalids you see in the poorhouse. Peter was romping around the room with Mushy the cat, while Mother and Margot and I were peeling boiled potatoes. When you get right down to it, none of us were doing our work properly, because we were all so busy watching Mr. Van Daan. Dussel had opened his dental practice just for fun. I'll describe the session with his first patient. Mother was ironing, and Miss Van D, the first victim, sat down on a chair in the middle of the room. Dussel, unpacking his case with an air of importance, asked for some Induclo, which could be used as a disinfectant, and Vaseline, which would have to do for wax. He looked in Miss Van D's mouth and found 2 teeth that made her wince with pain and utter incoherent cries every time he touched them. After a lengthy examination, lengthy as far as Miss Van D was concerned, since it actually took no longer than 2 minutes, Dussel began to scrape out a cavity, but Miss Van D had no intention of letting him. She flailed her arms and legs until Dussel finally let go of his probe, and, it reminded me, stuck in Miss V's tooth. That really did it. Miss Van D lashed out wildly in all directions, cried as much as you can with an instrument like that in your mouth, tried to remove it, but only managed to push it in even further. Mr. Dussel calmly observed the scene, his hands on his hips, while the rest of the audience roared with laughter. Of course, that was very mean of us. It If it had been me, I'm sure I would have yelled even louder. After a great deal of squirming, kicking, screaming, and shouting, Miss Van D finally managed to yank the thing out, and Mr. Dussel went on with his work as if nothing had happened. He was so quick that Miss Van D didn't have time to pull any more shenanigans, but then he had more help than he's ever had before. No fewer than 2 assistants, Mr. Van D and I performed our job well. The whole scene resembled one of those engravings from Middle Ages entitled A Quack at Work. In the meantime, however, the patient was getting restless since she had to keep an eye on her soup and her food. One thing is certain, it'll be a while before Miss Van D makes another dental appointment. Yours, Anne. Sunday, December 13th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, I'm sitting here nice and cozy on the front office, peering out through a chink in the heavy curtains. It's a dusky out, but there's just enough light to right by. It's a really strange watching people walk past. They all seem to be in such a hurry, and they nearly trip over their own feet. Those on bicycles whiz by so fast I can't even tell who's on the bike. The people in the neighborhood aren't particularly attractive to look at. The children especially are so dirty you wouldn't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole. Real slum kids with runny noses. I can hardly understand a word they say. Yesterday afternoon when Margot and I were taking a bath, they said, what if we took a fishing rod and reeled in each of those kids one by one as they walked by, stuck them in the tub, washed them into their clothes, and then tomorrow they'd be just as dirty and tattered as they were before, Margot replied. But I'm babbling. There are also other things to look at, cars, boats, and the rain. I can hear the streetcar and the children, and I'm enjoying myself. Our thoughts are subject to a little change as we are. They're like a merry-go-round, turning from the Jews to food, from food to politics. By the way, speaking of Jews, I saw 2 yesterday when I was peeking through the curtains. I felt as though I were gazing at one of the 7 wonders of the world. It gave me such a funny feeling, as if I'd denounced them to the authorities and was now spying on their misfortune. Across from us is a houseboat. The captain lives there with his wife and children. He has a small yapping dog. We know the little dog only by its bark and by its tail, which we can see whenever it runs around the deck. Oh, what a shame. It's just started raining, and most of the people are hidden under their umbrellas. All I can see are raincoats, and now and again the black back of a stocking-capped head. Actually, I don't even need to look. By now I can recognize the woman at a glance. Gone to fat from eating potatoes, dressed in a red or green coat and worn-out shoes, a shopping bag dangling from their arms, with faces that are either grim or good-humored, depending on the mood of their husbands. Yours, Anne. Tuesday, December 22nd, 1942. Dearest Kitty, the Annex was delighted to hear that we'll all be receiving an extra quarter pound of butter for Christmas. According to the newspaper, everyone is entitled to half a pound, but they mean those lucky souls who get their ration books from the government, not Jews in hiding like us, who can only afford to buy 4 rather than 8 ration books on the black market. Each of us is going to bake something with the butter. This morning I made 2 cakes and a batch of cookies. It's very busy upstairs, and Mother has informed me that I'm not to do any studying or reading until all the household chores have been finished. Miss Van Daan is lying in bed nursing her bruised rib. She complains all day long, constantly demands that the bandage be changed, generally dissatisfied with everything. I'll be glad when she gets back on her feet and can clean up after herself, because I must admit she's extraordinarily hardworking and neat, and as long as she's in a good physical and mental condition, she's quite cheerful. As if I don't hear shh, shh enough during the day because I'm always making too much noise. My dear roommate has come up with the idea of saying shh, shh to me all night, too. According to him, I shouldn't even turn over. I refuse to take any notice of him, and the next time he shushes me, I'm going to shush him right back. He gets more exasperating and egotistical as the days go by. Except for the first week, I haven't seen even one of the cookies he has so generously promised me. He's particularly infuriating on Sundays when he switches on the light to the crack of dawn to exercise for 10 minutes. To me, the torment seems to last for hours, since the chairs I used to make my bed longer are constantly being jiggled under my sleepy head. After rounding off his limbering up exercises with a few vigorous arm swings, his lordship begins dressing. His underwear is hanging on a hook, so first he lumbers over to get it, and then lumbers back past my bed, but his tie is on the table, so once again he pushes and bumps his way past the chairs. But I mustn't waste any more of your time gripping about discussing old men. It won't help matters anyway. My plans for revenge, such as unscrewing the light bulb, locking the door, and hiding his clothes, have unfortunately had to be abandoned in the interest of peace. Oh, I'm becoming so sensible. We've got to be reasonable about everything we do here. Studying, listening, holding our tongues, helping others, being kind, making compromises, and I don't know what else. I'm afraid my common sense, which was in short supply to begin with, will be used up too quickly, and I won't have any left by the time the war is over. Yours, Anne.